Well, this is a very personal topic, and I think we all don't have any other chance except talking about it personally, so I'm going to start by telling my own story, how I came to this project at all. Well, for me, it started with this boy I actually never met. His Twitter name was OneUp. He was an Austrian activist, founder of Austrian Pirate Party, founder of Soup, which a lot of you might know or use, and was a game designer and generally a very active person. And he committed suicide in 2009. And I came across his story, or rather sort of non-story in a way, and was immediately intrigued by this sort of what, him reaction, like Meredith said. I mean, even if you don't know this individual story, I think that's my first point. Instead of a trigger warning, it's become sort of customary to include a sort of warning if you're talking about sensitive topics. But I think this is such a universal problem in a way that almost everyone is, in a way, triggerable, and we're trying to keep the triggers in a positive way, and talk about a sort of general phenomenon. But I think what really intrigued me here is how people can just disappear, I mean, and how people leave their remains on the web. I mean, welcome to Quake 3 Arena is a pretty haunting last tweet. And I was looking at this sort of dead Twitter wall in a way, and was thinking about the way sort of you tell your own life story in little bits and blobs. I mean, Twitter is to be really credited for the phrase momentary hiccup, which is like, if you have a problem, then we're experiencing momentary hiccup. But I think, in a way, Twitter is this big ocean of momentary hiccups, because you're telling your own lifeline in these little discrete moments, and in a way, it's sort of like Bergson's durée, or a sort of quality time. It's a very ancient sort of phenomenon that you try and explore your own life through the stories you're telling, bit by bit by bit. And I think Twitter is a technology that supports that. And I was reminded of a sort of soundtrack. He had a lot of songs on his timeline, and it reminded me sort of floating in empty space. I was thinking of the Voyager Golden Record. I don't know if you've ever seen the cover of it. It's an amazing thing. It was sent out to space in the 70s and included all sorts of songs and sounds from outer space. And if you're trying to do an infographic that aliens will at some point be able to read, I think it's a pretty challenging task. And trying to imagine what a sort of alien would look like, the thing you don't actually understand at once is the point at the bottom, which actually gives you the minute time frame or reference, and it's actually the hydrogen atom, a change of spin in the hydrogen atom. And so these two little circles, the distance tells you actually the scale to decipher the entire whole cover diagrams and the binary code, because this is the smallest possible time element, the smallest transformation. And thinking about sort of soundtracks in space and golden records, I was reminded of this from Gödel Escherbach. Douglas Hofstadter wrote an amazing book in the 70s. And he thinks a lot about isomorphism, which is basically an analogy, two sets that can be mapped to one another. So this is the diagram which shows, Hofstadter calls isomorphism a transformation that preserves information. So we have a little time switch, but in the way the information stays the same. And Hofstadter has really, I think it's been such an influential book because he really places the analogy at the heart of everything, of language, of thinking, of rational reasoning, and cognition itself. He wrote a book a few years later, which is called I Am a Strange Loop, where he actually argues that consciousness itself works like one of these analogy systems where something has just gone wrong, where the representation doesn't work out exactly. And thinking of OneUp's Twitter wall and thinking of this name. I mean, one up is from gaming, that you're constantly sort of striving for the next level, so it's like a gratification. If you do well, then you're going to make it up to the next level. And this whole idea of sort of meta levels, the sort of meta is better sort of jumping thought, I think is illustrated very well in this this idea of Hofstadter, that you're constantly doing this sort of querying what sort of your mind versus the outside world. You're constantly doing these comparisons. I think it's a very fixed thing in our minds, that we think we're these amazingly digital people, but in fact we work so much, we rely on this analogy so much, so in a way we're in a constant sort of querying mode of, is this, the map is not the territory, our friends are not our real friends, our Facebook friends are not our proper friends, and especially with the digital world, another sort of layer which seems even more surreal somehow. I think we're constantly doing this sort of questioning, and that determines our research questions, examining these matters in a way, because we try and see the differences between, let's say, answers and search results. And this is constantly something we're checking, but this is the analog way of thinking, and I think this is very well represented in, well, this is the GIF Reaper, which sort of surfaces somewhere in Faselsuppe, I think. It's a mode of representation, and we're doing sort of comparisons mentally, and this has been in art history or in the history of thinking for a long, long time. And Derrida, he relates sort of difference and change to the idea of the trace, or what he calls a ghost. And I think there's this quote by Albert Schweitzer. I think he says something like, the only important thing in life is the traces we leave behind when we go. And I mean, that's pretty cheesy as epitaphs go, but I think in the sort of web context, the trace is a really important idea, because, like I said, the Twitter war, we don't really have a culture of dealing of how do we want to remain on the web once we've actually literally physically dropped out of it. So I think these traces are really, in a way, very inspiring. And Derrida relates this very closely to the ghost. So, like, when I was looking at this Twitter wall, it is spooky in a way. And I don't know if you've seen the Apple landing page when Steve Jobs died. We don't really have the perfect way of commemorating or finding a digital heritage. But I think, of course, we don't, because we don't have the experience yet. It's just, well, simply put, although there are maybe hundreds of thousands of people already dead on Facebook, and maybe you have a handful of dead Facebook friends as well, but in fact we don't actually have the experience of dealing with that yet, how we want to process our digital remains, or what we want our sort of lifelines or timelines to be as soon as we've dropped out of the web. So what I think, how this relates, the sort of depression, to what I was mentioning about isomorphism, about comparing and trying to sort of state a reality by constantly comparing two sets against another. I mean, Goethe, I don't know if you know the book Goethe Escherbach, but he was a first-grade troll, basically. So he totally owned modern mathematics and destroyed century projects of at least 3 people, including Russell and Whitehead, on their big mission to show that everything is consistent and complete, and he just went and traumatized the entire science, saying, no, in fact, it isn't. And these loops and the strange patterns that where analogy doesn't work out, are right at the heart of logic and mathematics and all thinking itself, so we can't actually escape those. We're always looking for the completeness and consistent systems, but in fact, the strange loop is actually a trait of the system itself, and I think this incompleteness and inconsistency and constant reflecting back upon yourself is, in a way, I've been treating depression and melancholy as a sort of special case of this strange loop. Hofstadter argues it's like as soon as you ask questions to yourself instead towards the outside world, and for me that's also the connection to net activism or activism in general, because I think if you're constantly reflecting your own self and your own mental state, which is in a way a very strong feature of depression, it's very hard to actually direct those questions to the outside world and to make that loop and not just constantly fall back onto yourself. And I think this strange loop phenomenon which is often described in research also, in different terms. A lot of people say, well, you know, in fact, depression is this totally selfish thing. I wouldn't really call it selfish, but I think that's exactly the problem we're talking about, the sort of self-reflectiveness. And depression does have a long tradition, also a long tradition of being described as an illness, as a mental illness, but also as a sin. And if you look at the characteristics of, let's say, the symptoms that are on the DSM-IV list, there hardly any of those are biographical or psychological data factors in that sense, but they are very much about how we relate to the physical world and how we relate to the social world, which I think is, in a way, best represented here. This is an ancient, or rather old, Renaissance picture from Descartes' book, and he was doing studies of consciousness and perception, and for me this is still one of the most, elegant pictures, because it actually shows the way we try and reflect the outside, and there were several of these. I think this is also an instant of this analogy of finding isomorphism between what's reflected in my head or the picture I make of the world and the sort of outside world. This has been a great topic in all of science and philosophy ever since, really. And actually, this Descartes image is itself a bit of a meme, which is even older, because here you can see this on the left. The one on the left is another of Descartes' illustrations, and to show how you use your muscles and what happens in your brain, etc. So it's about tool use, but the one on the right, that actually predates Descartes by about 130 years, and that's the very famous picture by Dürer, Melancholia. I can maybe give a larger one here. It's an amazing picture because it has this figure on the right, described as an angel. So I was doing a bit of research into this picture. Obviously, it's this icon of art history, and everything is overlayered so much with so many interpretations, and you can hardly, read it or look at it, simply. But I think it's a really good picture because the figure on the right is, well, sort of an angel, and the sort of art historical discourse has really been very concerned about what kind of figure this is. Is this an angel? Is it male or female? And I was getting into all these debates, and then I did what I usually do when I'm stumped and looked it up on Wolfram Alpha, because that's something, which always just relies on the facts. And Wolfram Alpha obviously included all the inner angles of this strange shape here, the melancholy cube, which is a strange figure, and the angel is obviously not quite looking at the figure, but it has all the tools for it ready to, analyze, but the transition doesn't quite take place. So somehow the information isn't going where it should, and so it's a case of, not quite proper representation, and it's just looking off track. And in fact, Wolfram Alpha has it that the figure on the right is not a transsexual angel, as this physicist called neutrinos, the ghost particle that just goes through everything. And it reminded me of that, thinking of these angel sex discussion. But Stephen Wolfram just says it's a frustrated intellectual. And with that explanation, suddenly I could, in fact, do something after all. And I think the frustration actually comes through this strange loop phenomenon, that you would actually like to look at the world, do something. I mean, he's holding the tools ready in his hands and has all the scientific equipment at the ready. So it's not a matter of not having the proper materials, but just sort of missing the point, or something doesn't quite overlap. And this is a very sort of old motive, and this picture is obviously determines very much how we talk about this today. This is the 2011 screenshot from Lars von Trier's Melancholia film, and I think you can see a lot of the motives that are in the Dürer picture, but you can also see the great big planet in the background, and that's something that's very much related to the whole tradition of depression. You have sort of a displacement, that grief or sorrow or depression take you somehow, detach you from physical space, but also it's framed very much as a sort of gravitational force. It's been related to or connected to the planet Saturn since antiquity. And of course, the sort of melancholy goes right back to the Greek melancholia, the humours, etc. And that's a very bodily thing also. And so is the Latin word depression, which literally means you're sort of rooted to the spot, and maybe you'd like to go out and do something, but you can't actually. And the whole idea of this is basically comes from the hermit. This is the example or the motif that's been the most influential, I think, because it has to do with sort of being, frustrated at the world, being sort of having high ideals maybe, but not quite being able to work them out, and, eventually just sort of giving up or turning your back on society or finding your own sort of cocoon in a spatial or in a mental context. And I think we have a lot of our society, the way it works today, we don't have to go into a cave to do this hermit thing. It can be another procedure altogether. And it's been a very influential sort of in pop culture. I mean, this really lives on till today, and it's closely related to the ancient sin of acedia, which was like part of the biblical sins for a while. It's the Greek kyria actually meant sort of caring or being maintaining, paying attention to the dead especially, so kind of mourning. And acedia was like the lack of this, sort of carelessness, especially in relation to the time that has passed, the heritage, and so you're not treating your ancestors with respect, you're sort of just letting it go. That was acedia, and this was very much framed as the monk's disease, so that this was an infliction of the desert fathers who went into the desert and lived there as hermits. This is the first description of depression as a sort of in a clinical sense, although it dived under and became a part of the sort of Catholic sin canon until it was merged with sloth, which is like just laziness. So at some point there were 8 or 9 sins even, but acedia disappeared into that and has been a sort of sleeper sin in a way ever since, and I think that's really remarkable and tells us a lot about how we deal with depression today, because it's such a specific trauma. And to see these connections to the net, for me it was the question of how can a hermit still be connected? Can a hermit be connected at all, or does that mean you pull yourself out of society altogether? And I've been thinking about these actor-network relations a lot. So what does it mean to actually be in a network? And I think that net has a very specific way of dealing with sort of negative emotions. I mean, we have infographics like this one, and we have empathizing thoughts that just appear somewhere. We have, own memes that are related to negative feelings and somehow tell you, oh, I'm not the only one experiencing these sort of bad thoughts or something. We have recommendations, Dr. Freud, and, of course, the most important, clear cache. I think that's pretty good. Recommendation, because that's just exactly telling you to get rid of these constant positive feedback, which is a sort of exponential motion. So I've been trying to place this somewhere else, place this out of the sort of analog into a more digital or network context. And we do know a lot about the net in terms of that it works exactly like real life, but a few things work differently than in real life. And one thing that's constantly forgotten, or I think it's just not maybe ignored, sadly, is Metcalfe's law, which actually just tells you that in a telecommunication network, the value of the entire network increases almost exponentially with the number of participants. So you can see how many more connections are established in that sense. So this is a technical description, obviously, but I think this sort of idea finds its nicest or most inspiring sort of echo in philosophy in what's called actor network theory by Bruno Latour, who's a French anthropologist, I suppose. And he's basically transformed the whole concept of just, I'm just a happy node in a network and can input whatever is possible from my side to make this a sort of setup where you can't fail, where it's just either you input something into the system and give in more information, or you transmit something else. He describes different roles, sort of intermediaries or mediators, but this just removes this whole thing from a sort of failure, this sort of failure context, because in the net you can't actually, in this sort of network setup using sort of actor network or using Metcalfe, there's no sort of failure of an individual node as such, and I think that's just a very intriguing or, well, nice figure of thought. This is classic Hofstadter. To see what a strange loop is, or what a positive illustration of a strange loop is, this is the lap loop, and this is the last thing I want to give sort of for also the group question, how can small groups react? And this is something, the paradox, that actually it can't work. Everyone's sitting on everyone else's lap, and everyone's being supportive and very sort of unsupportive at the same time, but in a way it still works. And so what I'd just like to pass over to you in the sort of network context and small group context. Make your own routines. Focus on the sort of process, on time and change, small changes in time. Whitehead got over his sort of good trauma and went on to develop process philosophy, which has been extremely influential, and I think it's a way of getting rid of this sort of trauma of analogy of isomorphic sets that have to be exactly, have to represent each other, and he just finds a nice way out. Focus on the sort of process, on changes in time, and make sure you get your own routines straight, because they're sort of self-reflection or analyzing doesn't always have to be a bad thing, I believe, because nerds like Stephen Wolfram, he just published all these data on well, self-quantification, so that's the sort of nerdiest, most extreme way of self-analysis. But I think you can see nice things here because you actually see this sort of what he calls family dinner stripe. The gaps at the top are always where he, for years and years and years and years, he's just been saying that's important to me, that's the time where I have family dinner or whatever, and no one's going to take that away from me, and that's his routine, which is very, very visible in his self-analysis. So I think make your own routines, and this whole idea of connectivity, these are the two things I would like to give on to you, and I hope that we can get talking about sort of group context as well. So, connect. Feuer, magst du?
So while Stefan is changing the picture to something more comfortable, after these very theoretical remarks by Anwen, we want to talk about a case that some of you might know, the case of Stefan, who's willing to talk about it here in the open, which we are very thankful for because we think it's really important. One remark, I'm not a native speaker, Stefan is not a native speaker, so our English might not be as brilliant as Anwen's was. So we give our best and we hope to get the point across. Okay, Stefan, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
You are known as an activist of telecomics, and in the hacker and activist community, you've become very famous with a blog post you wrote last year. It was titled, I Decided to Kill Myself?
No, The Day I Wanted to Die.
The Day I Wanted to Die. That one spawned quite a few waves all over the globe, basically, because nobody had talked about that issue before in the open.
It was a post with the 50,000 hits.
Impressive. What we try to do now is to find out how we came to that point. And to start with, I mean, you haven't always been an activist, obviously. I mean, nobody's born an activist. You had a normal life, so to speak, working at AOL, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I had been at AOL as a customer support guy, which can lead to depression too, but in another way.
So you had you had a day job, you had hobbies, you did many different things, like all we other guys did as well.
Yeah, I met friends, went to the cinema, role-playing games, all those normal nerdy stuff.
So, I mean, how does an average dude like that get into activism? What was your first contact, for example, with telecomics?
My first contact with telecomics was politics. It was all about ACTA and doing politics on a European level. And yeah, I stayed at this group because they were cool guys. We had quite much fun. And yeah, then I was with them nearly every day when I was online. We chatted all the day, had fun with cat pictures, you name it.
Telecomics is really well known, not just in Germany, but not just in Europe, basically all over the planet because of the ops that you were part of. One of those was obviously Egypt, the Arab Spring, where you were very active.
That started.
Yes, and later Syria, which is currently still running.
It's still going on, yeah.
How did your day working in these operations look like?
Well, you see, it started with Egypt when we organized the modem pools for dial-up for the Egyptian people. And I had my normal day job still, working 8 hours a day, and then I came home. I just moved to Berlin at this time, and I lived at a friend's apartment. And then I started looking in my terminal, my chat client, and working and doing phone calls to different companies to get their modem pools, organizing people, checking out configuration, everything, in this till 3 in the morning.
So basically your sleep schedule was host?
I had no sleep schedule, it was just, oh, I'm tired, thump, lying on the couch.
So no normal dinner times, nothing of that sort?
No, my good friend brought me food to the computer. So, and if he wouldn't have forced me, I would have forgotten to eat.
So
I was totally in the work loop, and yeah, I just forgot to eat sometimes. So he punched me to eat.
Well, I mean, in a certain way, success proved you're right. I mean, you had impact, you had success all over the media, not
Yes.
just in Germany.
We were
everywhere.
we were in the New York Times, we were in the Washington Post, we were in some Italian magazines. In Korea, we had pressing fears from all over the world after the Egyptian operation, but only one from Germany, by the way.
So what was your personal reaction to that sort of exposure that you got as a person and as a group? I mean, people called you a hero.
And they still do, and the reaction was heroes, not us. So we tried to call ourselves less than we were, and it was like, oh my god, press again, should we talk to them or not? And at one point we decided that we just dropped 10% randomly, but the rest we are doing, and because it was important that the story is going outside.
So the press had played an important part because they really pushed you guys for more information, more stories.
But not only the press, people I met when I was outside asked, what are you doing? My father called and asked, for example. Other groups asked, how can we join, how can we help? So you had to bring out time to integrate them while you were doing the other stuff. So you had two jobs instantly.
At that point, did you still have your day job?
Well, my company where I was working closed down,
okay.
So I was sitting on the couch all the day, eating chips and typing. But I did not found the energy to apply for a new job. So it was all this activistic work, doing all the time, and yeah.
So basically the last thing that gave your day some structure basically melted away for some reason, and your life was basically just the activism job at that point.
Yeah, and we were in a loop. We were working and talking about and working and then talking, and yeah.
So let's come to the point that brought us all here, the point where you decided that maybe it couldn't go on like that anymore. What would you say was the final straw? What made you decide to end it and to end your life?
It was, I was sitting in preparation of the case communication camp. I was writing the presentation for my talk at the camp. And while I was writing it, I was like, fuck, where is my life gone, and will I ever get it back? And then I thought about it, and there was no chance to get it back. I didn't saw any chance to get back in my normal life. And so I was writing everything down, doing the presentation, getting prepared, packed my stuff for the tent, and decided to say goodbye.
So why did nobody realize that you were at that point?
Well, I had the bad position at this point. I was working all the time. People who knew me knew I was working for the greater good. And it was normal that I don't have time because they saw that my work I did was important. It was important that I do this work, that people in Syria get help. And, well, the telecomics guys, they do it. It's okay, they're just doing it.
So I mean, the telecomics guy, you said you were in contact the whole day with the other telecomics agents. Why did nobody of them realize that how far you'd gone?
Well, some of our telecomics guys had a normal family life, and they had their normal structure and didn't saw any sign because we were not talking about that we were feeling empty. We did this after the camp, not before that. So, some who had the same problem thought they were the only one and it's not okay to talk about it. So there was a loop again.
Yeah. So, I mean, luckily you didn't go through with it. Luckily you found a way out. I think that calls for a round of applause. Thanks for being here, and we're all glad that you're here. You did find a way out. What changed your mind? I mean, you had decided to end it.
Yeah.
Why didn't you?
And at the case communication camp in our telecomics tent, we had a memorial for Lance Sussman, who killed himself after suffering for 15 years of depression. And we had this memorial, and they were all the hackers who called me some hours before a hero too. And I got aware at this point that depression is something to talk about, and that I'm not alone. The feeling of being alone was away. So suddenly I knew there are others suffering from it, and people know it. They reached out, and it's okay to reach out. And after I knew this, and I got, well, all the people there, they were coming to us and said, "Hey, great work, you're doing great work, you're a hero, and it's okay." So, and I was like, okay, it's okay to be a hero, just accept it and go, move on. And I didn't want it that these people who are very great are staying somewhere and do the same memorial as we did for Len.
So meeting the other guys in person at the camp was basically saved your life.
Basically meeting my personal heroes who said it's okay saved my life, yes. And of course the other guys, because we were the first time talking this openly. We never did that before.
Okay, so at the camp you shut down telecomics. You said, okay, we're done, that's it.
Yeah.
How did that help you guys?
It helped us that suddenly there was no pressure on us, because formerly we were gone. So I remember during the camp when Prime Minister Cameron from England thought about shutting down the net in London because of the riots, they came in the tweets, telecomics get prepared. And I was like, what the fuck? You all know how to do it. But people were expecting that we do it. And when we shut down, this suddenly was gone. There was no need to have any new duty. And yeah, it really freed us. Of course, we did not shut down everything. We left one IRC server to stay connected and talk after the camp.
So you said you continued to talk. What steps did telecomics take to fix the issue and maybe to make sure that it wouldn't happen again?
Well, at the moment we did not take enough steps, but we started, we are working on it. We're still working on it, as it's not easy to rebuild a complete system. So we now force people to go offline. We force people to go to bed. We force people to go to a party. We force people to have a romantic date. Something like this. And if someone has a bad mood, we listen to each other more than before. We started to listen. And this is very important. We are now talking more and more about personal stuff, which is saving people. Because we are friends. We are a huge bunch of friends. And now we're real friends.
One thing I want to hit on is the whole going out into the public thing that you did that not enough people did before, obviously. I mean, you caused quite a riot just because you did it, and everybody was kind of scared, kind of freaked out because somebody put that bomb into the open. Why did you decide to go out into the open like that? I mean, you could have just decided to say, okay, I'm fine now, let's move on.
Okay, on the one side I talked about it with Mitch Altman from Noisebridge, who is talking about his depression in public and open and made only good experience with it. And on the other side, I did it because people can understand me now. They understand why I have such mood changes every now and then. They understand now why I see things from another view. And they understand now that I sometimes just want to be left alone. It's now easier for people to handle me. And it's very important for other people that they know that they are not alone. I'm in a position where I can say, I'm suffering from depression, it's okay. Others are not in this position because of maybe job or family relationship or whatever. But then they know there is or there are other ones suffering from depression, and it's very important to reach out.
So what were your experiences with going out, putting yourself out there in the open?
I, for myself, had only good experience with it. I got emails of people telling me, I'm suffering from the same, I'm telling you the first time that I'm having this, and thanks for that. So that was very nice of them to tell me. On the other hand, I'm a little bit freer now. I don't have to hide it anymore. I'm not hiding myself before any other now. In a way, I am free now.
Awesome. Apart from looking at Stefan's case here, we extracted a few things that we want to go through now. Maybe you can change the slide thingy. We have, from Stefan's case and from other cases, come up with a few things that we think we might give you as maybe advice, things that might become a problem later, and maybe strategies how to fix it. So that's our summary to give a positive spin to this rather obviously depressing topic. There are a few, as I said, catalysts that we identified that we think people need to be aware of when interacting, and that we have a few strategies how to counter them. Those catalysts are not checklists. Not if you have all these catalysts identified, that doesn't mean that you have a depression. You can have a depression without having one of those in your life. It's not that simple. But those are things that we want to put out into the open, so you can see them in your environment, in your projects, in your friends maybe. And we separated those. There are things that relate more to the individual and things that relate more to the groups. I'm going to look at the individual parts, and Anwen is going to look at the group parts. So let's look at the individual. And there are certain personality traits that might become a problem and that might lead to a depression or help develop a certain sense of depression. There's something we call drivenness, the need to always have something new. People ask you, okay, what are you working on? And you have to present something new. And next year there's the next conference, and people are going to ask you again. You always have to provide new things. And that leads to many, many new projects never going anywhere. You all have 10 projects, 20 projects, 30 projects, and they never get finished, they never get done anywhere. And that can become a problem, because all those projects are in your life. You want to do all of them, you want to finish all of them, and you never can. So you start to put pressure on yourself, and those demands are also from the group, from the outside world, from the community. And the self-perception is that you just have to do more, because all the other guys and girls are doing so many cool and awesome things, and why are you not doing so many cool and awesome things? Another part is responsibility. As we saw in Stefan's case, the task at hand was really important. There were people dying, there were people suffering, and they really had this important job to do. And who's going to do it if not telecomics at that point? The perception is that the task is so important, so much more important than the individual, and that can lead to a great problem, because you start ignoring your needs as an individual, and you are a person that has needs. You cannot negate those. Another problem that we also saw in Stefan's life is that you start building your life around your project, your activity. You start to drop the things that structure the average day. Maybe you lose your job, maybe you stop having regular meals, maybe you stop having a regular sleep schedule. You start establishing mitigation strategies to deal with the pressure and stress that you put on yourself. In Germany we have this Flausch movement, where people throw this word at each other that it actually doesn't even mean anything anymore, just trying to cover up the problem, and that is a big problem. You cannot just dive into My Little Pony and hope that everything is going to be all right. My Little Pony can be a great distraction to release some stress, and it's awesome for that, but you just cannot fall back on that all the time. It can become really dangerous, just like a drug habit can become dangerous, and some people use extreme sports for the same thing, to just get their kick and just go back to working again. That sort of structuring a life around the project is not a good thing. And there's also this whole self-perception thing that we see in the hacker scene, that we see in the activist scene. Hackers are just getting shit done. They see themselves as a function, as people that just fix things. They see the world as a technological problem that just needs a few tweaks here, some code there, and everything's going to be fine. And at that point, you start ignoring that you as a person have feelings, that you as a person have needs, and that can lead down a very dangerous path. And now Anwen is going to talk about a few of the things in the group.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen that sort of pressure is a very dynamic element of this, because we do have this sort of feedback effects, and like I said, I mean, positive feedback in physics is something just exponential growth. I mean, feedback shares that with other nice things like nuclear chain reactions and, you know, spread of viruses, and it's just a very sort of powerful phenomenon, I think. And like these expectations from outside that constantly come back, telecomics should be doing this and this, it's always a matter of that sort of your self-reflection and all these expectations. They do sort of interact in a way, and I think, yeah, we've seen what the reward is for doing good work is get more responsibility, get more work, and start new projects, etc. I think, yeah, this is what we've also been thinking about in this sort of actor network. What does the individual in a little cluster have in comparison to the group? I think the perception is often that actions come from within a group, that it's seen as a sort of monolithic construction, and sort of individual ups and downs don't really feature, or shouldn't register. That's the sort of expectations, and so individual problems do in a way have to get marginalized, because it's all sort of the whole is more than the sum of its parts, etc. It's a sort of cybernetic, pretty strong movement that just all these little statistical bleeps are somehow mended out of it. And I think, yeah, what you have here that don't talk about personal issues, it's exactly that. Like, stay with the topic, get your shit done, and don't talk about this whole meta stuff, because that's just, you know...
Just disturbs.
It's just disturbing, exactly.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay, so after we've shown you some things that we have seen in Stefan's story and in other stories as problems, we want to give you a few strategies that might help you, might help your project to mitigate these traits, basically. Again, I'm looking at the individual, Anwen is going to look at the group. And as an individual, there are strategies that you can use to help you fix that issue. One is enforce a daily routine. We've seen that in Anwen's part of the presentation with Mr. Wolfram, who just has this slot in his day that is family time, and there's nothing that's going to stop him from having family time. That is a good thing. Be aware of your basic needs. You need sleep, you need food, and you need breaks and some leisure time. Plan that. Put it in your calendar if you can't get it otherwise, and block those parts. There is your sleep schedule, and if somebody wants to do an interview and you know you have to sleep there, you say, okay, we can't do the interview now, we do that when I'm awake. Don't let the project dominate your day. You decide what happens with your day, and you enforce that happens. And put it in your calendar, make sure that it happens. Those routines are really, really important, and they can help you mitigate those problems. Another thing that's really important is become detachable. If people talk about problems they have online in that sort of way, many people say, yeah, you know, just go offline. And that doesn't work, because for people like me, for example, who lives online, if I go offline, my support network is away. Then my friends are away. I can't reach the people important to me that can help me, that can support me. So just going offline is not a solution to many of us, I think. So a strategy could be to separate your personal and your project communication channels. Have an email address for your project and one for your private email. So you can still communicate via email without having to read all the project email that piles up. Don't synchronize it at a certain point, okay? At 8 p.m. I stop reading project email. I just stop because I can't do it all day. Make yourself detachable, have different accounts to be able to do that, and without having to lose your support network. You don't have to be available all the time. You have the right and the duty to be for yourself, to have time for you, and force that. Nobody's allowed to tell you otherwise. Another thing is, friends don't let all their friends join their project. It's cool to work with your friends because you like them. They are smart, they are funny, they're brilliant. But if you have all your friends in this project, that means that the project also dominates your social circle. Have people outside, get their feedback, have them tell you, okay, maybe you're investing too much in that project, maybe you're focusing too much on it. That's something that people from the outside can give you. So it's not a smart thing to pull all your friends into the project, even if you'd like to have them there, because you lose a feedback loop that can help you make better decisions, basically. And another thing, and I love putting quotes on slides, don't take your project too seriously. And Bertrand Russell, who's a really brilliant man and who's basically quotable in any case in your life, whenever you need a quote, Bertrand Russell has one. One of the symptoms of an approaching nervous breakdown is the belief that one's work is terribly important. And yes, there are important projects. We've talked about a few really important projects, but you are important as well, because if you're gone, who's gonna do the work? You have to take care of yourself, and then you can take care of the issues. And it's just not healthy to focus just on the project, because you're not a project-solving machine. You're a person. So don't ignore your feelings, it's important. Ask for help. And asking for help is, yes, I asked and nobody replied. Don't just ask the net. It usually doesn't work. Ask a person, ask some guy you're just talking to. Dude, do you have a minute? Can we talk? And if that person has no time, maybe that happens, ask the next person. It's okay to just ask more people, but ask them directly. Do you have 5 minutes for me? Do you have half an hour? Can we go get a coffee? Ask a person to get help, and get help. And finally, there is no shame in weakness. And weakness is quoted here. We're all human beings. We all have days where we just feel everything sucks, where we feel we suck, where we feel unloved, and where we are just sad. Don't be embarrassed. We all feel that way. And again, a quote from Joss Whedon's Firefly, when you can't walk anymore, you crawl. And when you can't do that, you find someone to carry you. Find people to carry you and to help you.
Well, I think sort of culture of failure and performance is really important in this context, and especially, I mean, fail has become a hashtag, and I think we have to keep the meaning of it, or really ask what does failure actually mean. So there is a sort of culture of measuring performance by what you can see people are doing, and don't put yourself and your own sort of mental health stuff too. Why is that relevant? I mean, there's a sort of attitude of saying we don't want to hear about it, and it's very hard to implement into a group, a sort of culture. But I think from experiences like the boy I mentioned at the beginning, Florian, the Meta Lab, the Austrian hackerspace in Vienna, has learned a lot through this experience, and they've implemented a more sort of sensitive approach to this. And I think also what Stefan was telling about telecomics, you can adapt, and especially in a small group, you can adapt and change these sort of attitudes and change these cultures, and not reward people by giving them more responsibility, more stuff to do.
And at least in the net, we tend to reward people with more responsibility. This is something we need to break down.
But it is very much also not only a matter of distribution of load, really, technically, but I think this culture aspect and how do we behave as a group is very relevant. And well, for me, it's this sort of fail attitude that we should just be a bit more careful with this label, maybe. Well, guilt is the strange loop sort of phenomenon in itself, because it just totally reflects resenting what you've done before, or maybe what you haven't done, or the expectations from the outside world. So guilt is this totally strange, loopy phenomenon, and I think a lot of people who really suffer from major depression are ever so troubled by this whole load. It just gets worse and worse and worse, and things just load up. And I think the routine and focusing on small changes and focusing on process instead of status and analogy is maybe a way out in the sort of network context, because yeah, we've been talking about sort of small implementations, and Tanta suggested this sort of Tuesday, you know, if you're trying to find a day in the week where everyone can meet up, it's always Tuesday, you know, so Tanta was like, well, why not do a sort of Take Care Tuesday or something? Just institutionalize little motions, make small teams, build like in diving. I go diving, and then there's always this buddy system. You're always coordinating with your partner, and there are small measures you can actually implement rather quickly, I think, that might have a big effect. Connect. Well, that was my point. And get professional help, that was your point, which doesn't mean get to a doctor. Find out what you need. Do you need a secretary? Do you need a psychotherapist? Do you just need a friend? Make your own routines and find your own way of professional help, which doesn't mean a doctor necessarily.
What I want to say, it's not a shame to reach out and get help.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah.
As we have no time left, and maybe some people will have questions, and we don't want to have them on the stage as it's too big and not a safe space for talking about this topic on your own. We are going upstairs and take a little part of the open space in about 10 minutes, so if you want to join us, get a cigarette and then get something to drink and join us in the open space to talk about this topic if you like. Thanks.
Thank you.